Hi everyone, welcome to Itsy Bitsy's live read of 17 Marigold Lane by R.M. Gilmore. Chapter 1. I'd cried for the better part of the night. Sleep hadn't been through a thought. How could I possibly? How could anyone? I blinked against a beam of escaped light glaring through my window as thick autumn clouds passed over the sun. The ragged corners of my eyes burned. I glanced at the clock. 6:21. I shouldn't have cared about school, but habit and a desperate need for normalcy called me out from under Nan Lilla's quilt. Stumbling to my dresser, I caught sight of myself in the mirror and cringed at my own horrendous reflection. Puffy eyelids covered bloodshot eyes. My nose was raw from clearing away snot with my sleeve. I stared into my own murky eyes, lost in time. For the last 24 hours, time had been a fleeting idea. I imagined my lightly freckled face and wondered how I'd looked in a month. 6, a year. The word magnificent played over and over in my head, and suddenly my post-ball face didn't seem so bad. Whether it was a conscious effort or a primal instinct to refute mortality, my brain couldn't comprehend the words Dr. Harris had said. Part of me held hope that he was wrong. The other half of me wanted to scream, curse God, rip my red hair from its roots, and leap from the second-story window. Unfortunately, that fall wouldn't kill me. Knowing my luck, I'd break my back and live the rest of my short life in a wheelchair. Suicide attempts aside, there was nothing I could do but to wait. Wait for treatment. Wait for news. Wait to die. In the bathroom, I splashed cold water on my face. The rims of my eyes stung with salty tears running over them for hours on end. My freckles, which usually stood out against my ivory skin, were hidden behind a mask of splotchy red. I considered putting on makeup, but nixed the idea at the thought of black streaks on my face when the crying started again. It would, of course. There'd be a lot more crying to come. I should get dressed. It was getting later every second I stood there feeling sorry for myself. School sucked, but it was better than sitting at home thinking all day. Back at the dresser, and none the prettier, I pulled my snot-stained sweater over my head, catching a glimpse of the culprit, the murderer, in my reflection. The assailant. The bastard that would likely kill me before I even had a chance to really live. 80% survival rate for those in the low-risk zone. Unfortunately, that wasn't me. I was too old. It was too large. It was encroaching on the bone and limp, and showed no signs of slowing down. I lifted my arm above my head and exposed the golf ball-sized tumor that had made itself at home on my bicep near my armpit. What had begun as nothing more than a knot, a pimple on the underside of my scrawny wing, had become a killer seemingly overnight. Taking over the muscle in the matter of a few months, the nearby lymph soon after, it was quickly making its way to the bone where it would take up shop, keeping its toxins into my body, spreading until I was one day a walking cancer giant. The scissors that sat in the jar of pencils on my dresser silently called my name. My fingers trembled with the need to take those scissors and cut the ruthless thing from my body. It was an invader, an intruder, a burglar intent on stealing from me the one thing that couldn't be bought, sold, or bartered. I wanted it gone, out of my body. Extricated seemed the most fitting word. My whiskers wouldn't have been no match for the intensity of the thing, the big C, the naughty word no one wanted to mention but everyone knew. He who shall remain unnamed, the doctor, a young handsome oncologist, was my only hope, my only Obi-Wan. "You're up," my mom's husky voice whispered from the half-open door. "Why?" she whispered. I didn't know, but she hadn't spoken full volume since she stepped foot in Marysville General yesterday morning. "Yeah, it's 6:30. My alarm had gone off long ago, and any other day I'd been in the bathroom trying to do something with my thick head of red hair. I just didn't think you'd be going to school today. I shrugged my bare shoulders. What else am I going to do? Take some time to rest. Get your thoughts together, maybe. You've got to be exhausted. Why don't you stay home and sleep today? Mom, I sighed, if I stay home today, all I do is sit and think about it. I don't want to think about it. She opened her mouth to say more, but I knew what she was going to say and added my 2 cents before she had a chance to jump my case. Right now, I don't want to think about it right now. I looked away from her sudden face and back at my own. I just need time. I felt her move closer with her squishy arms wrapped around my middle. She buried her face against my back. Tears slowly dipped down my chin, just above my brow hooks, but she never made a sound. Getting my height from my dad, my petite brown mom hadn't stood past my chest in years, so I was grateful for the hug from behind. Having my sobbing mother bury her face between my boobs would have only made the tragic, awkward moment so much worse. Mom, I'll be fine. If I need to, I'll just come home, I reassured her. Mom sniffed back tears and left my back cold and wet. I'll drive you. I shook my head. I want to walk. Prue, it looks like it might rain, she pushed, but I wasn't budging. I pulled a clean hoodie over my head. I don't care. Rain was a constant during autumn in Flintlock. It was nearly unavoidable, which worked in my favor because walking in the rain was a welcome alternative to riding in the car with my sobbing mother for all those 2 minutes it took to get to Flintlock High School from my house. I needed time to think about anything other than what I should have been thinking about, and the 15-minute if I stopped to smell every flower meandering walk would work. Fine, she said under her breath, and waved her hand in my direction. She didn't look at me again as she walked out my door and down the hall. If I were any sort of daughter, I'd have followed her to her room, where she was likely crying into her dated rose-patterned pillow. But I didn't. She needed time too, even though she didn't think so. Her bawling had gone on all night as well, and hadn't done me any good in the end. She had every right to behave exactly like she was. Her only baby daughter had just been diagnosed with cancer. What parent wouldn't be a blubbering mess? Or worse, I had a feeling it would get worse, for both of us. I said bye, though, through Mom's closed door, and she mumbled something back to me. My long legs allowed me to take the stairs 2 at a time, but it didn't bring any arrogant grin to my face as it had just yesterday. The old door closed loudly behind me. I didn't bother to lock it. In a town like Flintlock, there was really no need to lock up anything. The October wind sent a chill through my jeans and down my legs. Fall was usually my favorite time of year, and blustering weather tended to bring out my inner weirdo, but the paper skeletons and cotton fiber webs filtering in the wind from house eaves just didn't hold the same wonder as they had only the day before. Dreary gray clouds loomed overhead, and I slumped in my hooded sweater, fully expecting a single cloud to open up and drain and dump rain on my funeral parade. My street, Marigold Lane, was one of the oldest in Flintlock. Houses on Marigold, mine included, were nearing their 100-something birthday, give or take a decade. There were other parts of town that were newer, but very few places were more recent than 30 years. My faded canary yellow 2-story Victorian sat 4 from the corner. Next door, Mrs. Calloway, a widow and a perpetual cat lady, waved at me from her pristine white porch while 3 cats rubbed their fat bodies over her spindly ankles. The gingerbread house 2 doors from mine sat vacant since Mr. Hollowitz died this summer. Weeds jutted up between the cracks in the aging front walk around masses of decaying leaves and storm debris, making the vacancy obvious. On the corner, where Marigold Lane meets Time Drive, the Schuster's matte brown Victorian Tudor mashup finally had its moments to fit in with the cheery High Neighbor Street. Historically haunted and feared by all kids under 12 in Flintlock, the old house was like Herman Munster at a Halloween party. Jack-o'-lanterns smiled from the front porch surrounded by rubber spiders, making pretty for the holiday but unaware of its year-round creepiness. I've never been inside, but I've heard there was an honest-to-goodness coffin in the living room. I always wanted to know for sure, but like every kid in Flintlock, I was too chicken to see for myself. In fact, no one I knew had actually ever been inside the old place to verify the rumors. A town like Flintlock was good for two things: community and bullshit. Honestly, the two went hand in hand. Most days I eyed the house cautiously as I passed, curious but still well aware of the stigma that surrounded it. Anxiously anticipating rain, huddled in my favorite sweater, I stood on the corner of Marigold and Time and stared at that place full on. The windows were dark. By all outward appearance, no one was home. I've never seen Mrs. Schuster in my 17 years, but I always figured Mr. Schuster was some kind of salesman or something because he was often away for long periods. I assumed his absence was the reason behind the regular tall grass and chipping paint, but told myself there was no reason outside of medical disability that his wife couldn't at least work around the yard. As I stood there, blatantly watching the house, feeling a little like Ray Peterson spying on his new creepy neighbors, I began to realize how rude it was when kids would point and stare and dare each other to go up to the door. Unlike the murderous family in The Burbs, these neighbors weren't new, and regardless of the local lore, I doubted they had bones in their backyard. In fact, as far as I knew, they'd lived in that house longer than I'd been alive. The distant first bell of Flintlock High clanged up the street. I glanced down Time toward the school. First period wasn't required, but I wanted the college credit, so I sucked it up and decided to spend my senior year going to school an hour early. That was before this. Why did I even care to go? It wasn't exactly like anyone missed me. It wasn't like I didn't have a damn good excuse. From the corner of my eye, I caught movement in the upstairs window of the Schuster's house. My eyes shot toward the window, searching for any sign of life. A dark curtain slammed shut and piqued my interest even further. Was that the exclusive Mrs. Schuster watching from on high? Would she open the door if I knocked? The muscles in my skinny legs twitched, trying to unwittingly force me through the old metal gate and to the door. "What are you thinking?" I muttered under my breath, and groaned at my own stupidity. I'd walked past the house more times than I could count, and not once had I seen someone, or something, inside. I had seen Mr. Schuster twice, hurrying out to his tan Volvo early in the morning. He was taller than me, maybe thinner too, with a mop of jet black hair on top of his head. You're not thinking, that's the problem. I shook my head and looked down at my oversized feet. Same old me, perpetually alone and consistently boring. Screeching tires drew my attention back to the street. A red 60 muscle car spotted the gray primer, fish-tailed down Time and toward Marigold. I held my breath and waited for the inevitable. Thank you for listening to this portion.